Okay, everyone. So for our last two problems here, there's a GUI problem, which is a bit broad in how you can approach it. So for that one, I'm more so just going to kind of explain how the make widgets kind of works a bit more. Again, this one was just a bit more broad on how you want to calculate everything too. It was more so just a refresher on how to make a GUI, as those are on the final. So there's not a clear-cut answer to these ones. As long as you design one with some entry boxes and read in the values, you'll be fine for the grading. What I do want to focus on though is this recursive function that is called file contents count. So what this function should do for us after we implement it is what it should do is should return a count of files that have the specific content that is provided to you. So what this means is that you can do a counting variable, again, very similar to our local count that we use in the previous problems. And what we're going to try to do is make sure that the function returns a string, or excuse me, the amount of times that the content appears inside of a specific txt file. So to go ahead and get started with this, what we're most likely going to want to do is our general counting variable. So I'm going to say, we can call it local count again, like we were calling it earlier. After we go ahead and we create this local count, what I'm going to do is try to list out all the items inside of our folder that's there. So here I say for item in os.listdir folder. Now what I want to do is I need to make sure that if I have a directory, that I don't approach it the same way as I do with the file. So what should I do in this scenario where if I have a directory? Oh, and one more thing I forgot to do is we need to do n is equal to os.path.join folder and items. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going ahead and typing in the folder. This is the same as the path name that's up here. It's essentially the exact same thing, but I just have a different parameter name. So I'm getting the parameter folder and I'm putting it in here. Now what I'm going to say here is if my path is a directory, what do I want to do if it's a directory? Well, what I'll most likely need to do is say my local count is going to be equal to the remainder of the recursive calls that I need to go through. And what these recursive calls are essentially is I'm going to increase the n into the new path name that I'm getting, but I'm going to keep the same content, right? Because I want to make sure that the content is being not modified for me, because content is going to explain what letter I'm looking for essentially. Cool. So now what I need to do here is I need to check my other scenario. So what's the other one that might occur? If my os.path is a file. Now what happens if it's a file? Well, what we're going to do here is actually go ahead and open up this file. So I'm going to go ahead and say file is equal to open, and it looks like the file that I'm going to be getting here is the n that I'm trying to get, and I'm going to be reading it. So after I go ahead and I read it, I'm going to get my content. And to showcase what's going on here, what I'm going to say is content is equal to file.read, and then I'm going to attempt to print out the content that I have. Now, if I go ahead and uncomment this guy down here, try to do it this way. Great. Well, notice that I'm getting a few of the feedback that I was getting before. Here. Awesome. I might be using an older version of it, so the TXT might be a little bit different. But in general, let's just try to see if I can get that error again. It looks like I'm getting an unsupported operand type for the none type and int. So what's happening again is that my local count is trying to add up the returned value of file contents count, but because this is an empty one, because I'm not returning anything at the very end of my function, I'm not getting a numerical value back, I'm getting an empty back. So what I'm going to try to do is also return local count down here. And now if I run my code here, we'll notice that, yeah, my TXT files are a bit older, but in general, I have the updated files from it as well. Awesome. So now what I'm going to attempt to do here with these guys being printed out is I want to make sure that I'm not just printing out the content of them like I did normally. I'm going to try to check if my file, or excuse me, or actually, you know what, I'm going to rename this file content, because the word content is already my parameter. And now what I'm going to say is if content in file content, what does that tell us? Well, that means that my string is somewhere within the content of this string, so I'm going to increase my variable again. Cool. And it looks like I'm getting my 2 and 4 defined pretty well. Am I not getting file contents count? Let's see here. File content test 2. Oops. Let me change this one. I didn't have an F there. Like so. Awesome. And it looks like I'm getting 2, 4, and 11 at the end there for me. And again, if you have the different little output there, that's fine. I believe I'm using older TXT files for this one. But again, the general idea applies. So in general, in this scenario, and for the final as well, when you're working with it, if you're asked to work in a directory of things, you want to make sure that you use this if statement. Otherwise, if you're asked to work in the file ways of these things, you're going to want to use this if statement here. Awesome.